Hey, loggers, welcome back to another bite sized episode of the Backlog Breakdown. I'm your host for this week, Josh Broccolo, and I'm coming at you. This is going to be pretty stream of consciousness, and I just wanted to talk about something. We haven't put out a bite sized episode in a while, and one thing that I've been into lately that I wanted to talk about a little bit is, we're done with this spooky month. We're done with October. We've played our Alan Wakes. We've played our Hellblade, but I still can't get enough. Still wanted some more spookiness. So one thing that I continue to go back to year after year when I want something spooky is a manga artist, Junji Ito, and really, yes, he's a manga artist, but he's also a storyteller, and that's one of the things that I love with him. He does so well at the way that he tells spooky stories, but then also draws things out. He uses the medium of manga really well. And we'll get into that in just a second. So uh, e- I've been reading more Junji Ito lately and getting some stuff from the library. So just jumping back into his works, and I think there's really something special with what he does. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit in your ear holes for a few minutes here today. So Junji Ito, if you don't know who this man is, that's Junji, Junji, and Ito, Ito. He is a popular horror writer from Japan. I believe some of the first manga that he put out was in the late 80s. So this guy's been around, and he's still doing it. So he's been around for quite a while. And one of the things that makes him special, I mean, kind of one of the characteristics is that he writes a lot of stories that are within the horror genre. He uses different themes in different like styles of horror, but he really delves into horror. That's kind of his main gig. I know he's done a little bit of, I think, comedy or something like that, but really he's known for his horror stuff, and that's all that I've read by him. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And like I said, he's been around since the late 80s. So he's been honing his craft and telling stories. And something about these stories is that they are primarily he writes short stories. And there are stories that he writes where some of the same characters return. There are a few long form stories, which we'll be talking about here today. But primarily he's been putting out just short stories instead of one long narrative like a lot of other manga. If you're familiar with something like Shonen Jump, you know it's a very long narrative that carries on. But Junji Ito is different in that he primarily does short stories, so it's really cool to see to imbibe in a lot of his work and to see the creativity that he has with still, all within this realm of horror, how he uses different themes and different tropes and even different styles of horror to tell different kinds of stories. When it comes to his work as a manga artist, one thing that I find really interesting is that I don't think um, his style is not super unique. I mean, it definitely, like, if you see something by him, then you can tell that it's his. So in that sense, it is unique, but it's not something. Most of the time, it's not super intricate. It's not like you see a panel and this is like the best artwork ever. But I think one thing that he does really, really well, if you pay attention, is that most of his stories start off very mundane, very plain, very normal. Like a lot of kind of Shonen Jump stuff. You'll see characters in a high school, so or the Japanese countryside or cities or things like that that are very mundane and plain, and that's kind of the style that he uses. And then as the story kind of ramps up in what it's trying to do, in some of its themes, in its overall spookiness and tone, his art style starts to change or get more intricate, and he does these amazing panels. He's really great at the art of the page turn. So he will bash you over the head with a really intricate and often, horrible and disgusting image, to kind of shock you. And that's one of the ways that he uses the medium of manga in order to tell some of these stories. So I think in terms of artwork, he may not be the best artist, like technically, but he has honed his craft very, very well. So there's something really special with the way that he uses the art form in order to tell his stories. And frankly, I mean, his artwork has gotten so much better throughout the years. So I think, yeah, he's just a master because he's stuck to kind of one um, general kind of genre throughout, at least the stuff that I've read from him. And so that's in terms of artwork, but I think also something special is that he really is a storyteller. He really enjoys, coming up with these short stories, and you know what? Out of the dozens, probably hundreds at this point of stories that he's told, yes, you're going to get some ones that you like more than others. Some that you can kind of brush away, like, okay, that was all right. You've got some endings that may not be satisfying, especially to someone like me, a Westerner that wants, a tightly wrapped up narrative. Sometimes he leaves things very open ended, but then he can return to those same characters. So, um, yeah, not every story is going to be the best story you've ever read, but the short story collections, I think, he enjoys, while they're all in the same genre. There is something different about each story, and sometimes he really hits on some gold. I think throughout the time, and because of his pacing and the way that intersects with his art, it always keeps me coming back. I want to see what's going on inside this guy's head, and because he does use the medium of horror as well, I think, one thing that horror is, it's an exploration of our fears as humans, and so he delves into that, and so he comes at it from a lot of different perspectives. There could be, simple body horror, which is great for manga, right? Because he can draw some really, yeah, very disgusting things. That's what freaks you out. Sometimes it's the story. Sometimes it's the way that people react. Sometimes he has these very, human looking characters that are very uncanny and that look dead, that have those very dead eyes. I mean, the way that he communicates these different ways of these horrible things, I think are just done really, really well. So I think he's a great storyteller, and he really has kind of plumbed the depths of horror and delving into what do we fear. When we think about horror, oftentimes, I don't know, one of the ways that I look at it is that it is a look inside. It is a look at what you may fear, and to the effect that you build up a bit of mental resiliency, right? So you are kind of slowly, ratcheting up the tension and slowly building momentum, and helping to train yourself to look into the dark things. So you're not that you're desensitized to them, but so that you are more resilient in facing hardship, in facing um, the horrible parts of the human heart. Because really, the most horrible things are the things that we do, right? We realize as fallen human beings, as those who are totally depraved, right? That sin has affected all of us. That we are the problem. Often, it's not our circumstances at all. It's what we do with that. And so using horror to look into those things and looking into the human reactions to sometimes these crazy situations, I think is one of the redeeming aspects of horror as a genre itself, in exploring those very human fears. In a sense, it can help to make us resilient, but also anti-fragile. If you know that term, it is resilient, is able to withstand things, right? But anti-fragile is to actually become better and stronger through pain. Like our muscles are anti-fragile. They're not just resilient. They won't just stand up to exercise. They actually get better with exercise. And I think mentally we can do that when we look into some of our fears as well and some of our horrors. So in general, I would recommend, if you're a fan of horror, of course, it goes into, it's a dark medium. So if you don't like it, then maybe not check out Junji Ito's stuff. But he's got a lot of different books that I've read, and like I said, they're mostly short story collections. But three works that he's known for, I mean, that are probably some of his more popular works because they tell longer form stories. I want to just go over really quickly with one in particular that kind of stands out to me, at least for the theme. Yeah, because these three stories, Uzumaki, Gyo, and Tomie, all three of them do very different things while still staying in the horror genre. So Uzumaki is one of his, I would say it's probably his most famous. It was one that I kind of started out with, and it's this story about this town that is slowly kind of descending into madness, and it is an obsession with spirals, which sounds really weird, and it to me it feels like a very Eastern concept as opposed to like a Western, horror big bad. But you see like the madness that comes out through this as people and then eventually things within this city start to become obsessed with spirals and the spiral pattern. And so they start to do things to where they're creating spirals and then they want to become spirals. And it's really strange and weird, but it is horrifying to see, the way that the humans act in ways that are not very human at all. So I would highly recommend this story. It starts off again sort of mundane and then odd and uncanny, and then it gets full bore crazy, almost to this kind of cosmic horror. Maybe not quite that far, but very esoteric. I think this is well, it's one of my favorite stories, and it is long form. I'd highly recommend it. Uzumaki is probably one of his best known works. The second one that I wanted to talk about is one called Gyo. And just because it takes such a different turn, while it is horror, it's almost more of like the thriller, almost action kind of horror. Because in this story, it's about this stench of death, where there are these strange creature, like fish-like creatures that are coming and attacking humanity. So it's almost like it's horror from the animal kingdom and the things around you, and coming against humanity itself. And so like humanity being powerless against kind of the greater pressures of the earth and the other inhabitants in the earth. So it's much more straightforward of a story. It uses some elements of comedy as well. This one is probably more, when you think of kind of an American action, or not action, I'm sorry, an American horror movie, this kind of fits that bill a little bit more. There's kind of what you see is what you get. It's not as crazy. It's not as deep, but it's a lot more fun. It's just fun. So if you want something that's a little easier to get into, I would recommend Gyo. It's a good read. It's fun, and the terrifying nature of it is not one that's spiritual or something along those lines. It's not one that's going to stick with you. It's just one to have fun with. So Gyo is another one that I would recommend. And finally, I wanted to talk about Tomie. Tomie is the name of a young girl, and you do see her age throughout the story. So this is a collection of different short stories that center around this character that Junji Ito has made, named Tomie. And this is a character. She was human. She seems to be human, and she's very, very beautiful. And the stories center around this horror of this beautiful woman that, generally within horror, beautiful women are the first to die, right? They are the well, I was going to say protagonist, but that's not the right word. They're kind of the almost damsel in distress. They're usually the ones that are running away from the axe murder or something like that. In a horror story, they're the victims of whatever is happening in the story. And this kind of turns it on its head to where she is the predator, the perpetrator, but she does it in a very feminine way, which I find really interesting. It's not that, she wields a chainsaw and chops people apart, kind of that a lot of, again, American horror and things like that would kind of delve into. But she uses her beauty to ensnare men throughout these different stories. But even then, that seems kind of run of the mill. But what she does is she ensnares them, and then in a way almost makes them go insane to the point where they want to kill Tomie. Like they want to possess her and her beauty so much that they end up killing her. And that's the point. Like, she wants that to happen because she can regenerate. And she, I talked about anti-fragility earlier. That's kind of her thing, is that when she regenerates, she becomes stronger. In some stories, I believe that there are multiple Tomies that are created out of the different parts of her body that then, grow back. So it's this really interesting, to me, delve into this idea of the feminine horror, if that makes sense, because she's weaponized her beauty. And it's not that she, takes upon a masculine kind of strength to destroy her enemies. It's that she uses her beauty and her femininity in order to ensnare and then cause men to go insane and to kill her, to then like distort their masculine nature of strength and protection and turn into the predator. So she is the predator that turns the man into the predator to kill her so that she can come back stronger. It's a really interesting kind of subversion. I know that word often takes a bad rap, but on this trope, and that's throughout this whole book. These stories that are told with Tomie go along those lines, and it reminds me a lot of Proverbs 5. Okay, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but Proverbs, is the wisdom literature. It is this teacher speaking to his son. I'm going to read the first 6 verses. He says, "My son, be attentive to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion, that your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she's bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander, and she does not know it." And so this is a warning in the Proverbs. And of course, this is a warning against following after this woman who seeks to use her beauty wrongly to ensnare a man. Now, later on in the proverb, okay, lest you think that it's she's purely the villain and, oh, poor man to get snared up. No, the proverb goes on to talk about how if a man is to follow after this woman, that he is at fault. Okay, it's not just her fault, but this is a warning that against the distortion of femininity that would seek to ensnare someone. And for the teacher here is saying, my son, don't go after this woman who would do that. And it just reminded me of these stories of Tomie, because that's exactly what she does. She uses her outward beauty, because she's not beautiful inside. Obviously, she is trying to ensnare these men. She uses that as this picture, this horrible thing. And that, again, is what horror does, is it allows us to look at what we fear the most. And in this sense, it is this distortion of femininity and this abuse of femininity. So I really appreciate the way that Junji Ito kind of delves into that as one of his themes throughout these stories in Tomie. So I think that's another collection that would be a lot of fun to check out. In conclusion, I've read lots of Junji Ito. Pretty much I'd recommend anything that he does. I just really enjoy his artwork, his storytelling. I think he's got a lot of good things to say. Some stories are better than others, but check something out. Uzumaki, I think, is probably his best overall. If you get into that, it gets pretty crazy. But any of these I'd recommend. I mean, yeah, like I said, anything I've read by him, I've enjoyed. But Uzumaki, Gyo is a fun time, and then Tomie as well. But till next time, loggers, keep beating down your backlogs. We'll keep breaking down the benefits.